welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is Richard Shaktili. Richard is a special counsel in Hopkins and Carley's Family Wealth and Tax Planning Department. He double majored in economics and political science at UCLA and graduated cum laude from UC Hastings College of the Law, where he was a member of the Thurston Society, and he's been an attorney for over 22 years. Richard has extensive experience advising ultra-high net worth clients on all aspects of estate planning, including family business succession planning. He also has extensive experience in the field of trust administration and intra-family entity planning. And throughout his career, he's been a frequent speaker at seminars and programs on the topics of estate planning, wealth shifting and preservation, charitable gift planning, and charitable organization operation. Richard, thank you for joining me as my guest today.
My pleasure, Michael.
Okay. Today, Richard and I are going to be talking about the preservation of family businesses. And as we get started, I want to caution our viewers that this is a complex area. We're going to be focusing mostly on issues and not solutions. This interview is intended to be the basis for a further conversation with your advisors, possibly including psychological counselors. So,
possibly.
Yes. So anyway, we're going to be talking about, frankly, a lot of emotional issues and things that are involved here. And we'll see, maybe we'll talk about some other areas as well, depending on how the time goes. Today is November 4th, 2014. It doesn't really matter what day it is, but just to give you a reference of where Richard and I are at this point in time, the issues that we're talking about are timeless, so not an issue there. Okay, Richard, let's get started. How is a family business different from other businesses, and what complexity does that bring to succession planning for those?
Well, Michael, actually, let me give you my own definition of succession planning, estate planning, if you will, that I've come up with. It's really the transfer of assets from one person to another during life or a death in a way that makes the transferor the happiest. And this definition really comes into play when you're dealing with family business, because you need to, as an advisor, adjust your thinking as to what makes someone the happiest. A lot of times in the actual business setting, the capitalist model of thinking with respect to a business, the goal of a business is to maximize profits for the most part. The goal is also to make sure that anyone who's not pulling his or her weight is frankly going to either be fired or demoted, and people who are achieving are going to get raises and they're going to be promoted. And really everything is merit-based with respect to that type of business. Also in that type of business, you're not really interested on leaving your stake in the business really to your family members. A lot of, for example, we're in the Silicon Valley now, and most of these companies where people have shares and sometimes a substantial amount of shares, you don't mind leaving them to the business your children as an inheritance. But if you have a chance to sell it, for you believe is a good price, you'll do so immediately. And you don't really need to give, these types of shareholder interests, to your children. On the other hand, a family business, completely different potential set of dynamics. I say potential because many family businesses that I represent actually have the same kind of goals the husband and wife do as the actual capitalist model. But other things come into play here. First is where you really do want to leave this business down to the family. This business probably has your name on it, your surname on it, and you really would like the family, your children, grandchildren even, to actually continue the business and not sell it. And it's very important to you to have that family ownership, and as it passes through the generations. Another main concern is that the goal of the business may not be to maximize profits. It may not be to reward compensation and promotions based purely on achievement and to what you put in towards the business. A lot of other things that go into it are just fairness. You want your kids to actually be involved in the business. You actually want, you're going to be, your compensation is not going to be based on family issues, like if they are people get married or they're starting a family, you might want to give them a salary bump when their performance, frankly, might not deserve it. And actually, you're going to be very hesitant if your child is working for the business. If they're really just underachieving or they're just not cut out for that, you're not going to be wanting to give them demotions or even let them go from the business. And you may even actually end up promoting them because you feel like you have to because they're your child, and when they don't actually deserve it. And these are issues that all need to be taken into account by the advisor.
Right, and of course, and there are other dynamics because you've got other key employees in the business, and
well, so, Michael, that's a huge dynamic, because I'm glad you brought that up, because it's going to be hard to keep those key employees in many businesses. I mean, this is why, if there's anything that people get out of this conversation, it's really on the advisor side. You really need to expect the unexpected and really be able to spot these issues that we're talking about. And on the family person side, you really need to be able to be receptive to what the advisor is going to tell you, even if it's not something that you want to hear or you want to think about. Because with the key employee that you just brought up, that person's not going really to want to stick around if he or she believes that children are going to get promoted, unequitably, and people are going to be, given raises and things of that nature when they haven't actually deserved it. And then a lot of times, in order to keep the key employee around, because they realize the key employee's name is not on the name of the business, so they're worried about ever getting, there's going to be a ceiling as to how high they can go. So to keep that key employee around, you may have to overpay that key employee to get them to stick, which then could cause your family members to say, well, why is that person being paid more than what they're actually deserved? So it can be kind of a vicious circle, so so to speak. So very difficult issues that are involved here.
Okay. Why may the persons usually consulted about family succession plans be ill-equipped to properly help develop such a plan?
Well, Michael, when we're educated, in undergraduate and graduate school, the model that we are taught and that we are, driven to say is the kind of the ideal model is the business/capitalist type model. And therefore, we can have great ideas for the families as far as, succession planning transfers through buy-sell agreements or key man life insurance. We may have great tax advice. We may have great corporate advice, but we just may not realize that we have to think about the family dynamics. When we explain it, as we're talking today, it's not like it's hard for people to understand. It's actually common sense, but some people are just so focused on what we've been taught all of our lives that even this common sense approach doesn't immediately come to the advisor. And that's what's key about this, is that the advisor needs to just spot different issues. There may be a family that has no problems, but there also may be a family that has many of these problems that we're going to talk about, and you have to be just aware of it. And once you're aware of it, sometimes to a smaller degree you can give advice. Sometimes the problem is so large that you do need to bring in a psychologist, although I wouldn't call it a psychologist because so many people actually have a negative connotation with that word. So there are other, family counselors, things of that nature. There's a whole industry out there where people may need to be brought in.
Sometimes we call them coaches or other things.
You got it.
But yeah, I mean, the point to some degree is that I don't remember there being a thing in the curriculum for, I did take a psychology course that was just like a broad psychology course as part of my first couple of years in college. But I didn't have a psychology course about family dynamics and how does it relate to the issues that we deal with for business succession planning.
No.
And so anyway,
it's great now. There are people out there.
So we may have, and we're so accustomed to cramming, going through school facts related to maybe planning strategies or other things.
Correct.
But as far as talking about sensitivity and observing how brothers and sisters get along with each other, and how they how mom and dad
and come up with solutions.
How mom and dad are the referees,
yep.
and now suddenly, when mom and dad are gone, the referees are going to be gone.
Yeah.
Now what?
Now we need someone to step in.
Okay. So let's talk about maybe some of the conflicts for family members. What are some of them that relate to the business that we need to think about?
Well, we touched on some already, with respect to, the merit-based versus not merit-based form of compensation and promotion. I think conflicts can arise when if we don't get to the parents before they pass away, where they don't have a chance to listen to us, or they choose not to listen to us, and then they leave their family business to, their 3 children, and one of the 3 children is in the business, or 2 of the 3 children are in the business, but the third is not. There could just be conflicts there because with respect to the 2 that are in the business, they're usually the CEO of the business, or they're a majority interest in the board of directors, a majority interest in the shareholders, so they can set their own salaries, and which can be pretty generous. They can get perks like company cars and trips and things of that nature. And the person that just has the ownership interest, while yes, if the business is profitable, that ownership interest is going to go up in value, but the person who owns it potentially can really not realize that unless either dividends are declared in case of a C corporation, or in case of an S corporation or an LLC, actual profits are actually distributed out. And in fact, there can be even a detriment if you have an S corporation or an LLC where, they're hit with, the business has been profitable, makes $300,000 for the year, so they're going to be hit with a $100,000 income hit on their tax return, but the other children may not want to make distributions out because they want to keep all the profits in the business. I mean, you'd think they would make distributions out to at least pay that income, but they may not. And even if they do that, there's the person who owns the shares is still not getting anything other than a distribution, which immediately has to be paid to Uncle Sam to be attributed to the share of the income. So that's when I think a family counselor or a coach can really be invaluable to come and step in and actually give advice and try to resolve these disputes, to try to come up with a compromise solution that will make everyone happy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the real soft and mushy stuff, but what are some of the emotional issues that we need to think about related to family members?
Well, it's just, I think it needs to start out at the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's a little, I think it's frankly not too late, but it's kind of late if the parents are already gone or actually out of the business. I mean, you need to start talking with the parents, as soon as you can, hopefully even before they've, retired from the business. I mean, you have to start bringing this up as to their own succession plan. And this could involve things that they're not comfortable with. For example, talking with their kids about what they want. I think the worst thing you can do is to leave your family business that you've worked so hard for and that you mean so much to you during your lifetime, to leave it to children who don't want to carry on the business, who as soon as you pass away are going to be looking to sell the business at any price that they can get, right away, just to get rid of it. And that's not something that you want. You need to have them talk to the children, who's going to be involved in the business, who isn't. If you find that you have 3 children and you find that 2 really want to be involved in carrying it on and the third isn't, you need to talk with them about what are ways maybe you can get the third person out of the business. Do you have other assets that you can give to the third child so that they won't have these arguments that you and I just spoke about a few minutes ago? If you don't have significant assets, can you do something by buying life insurance, or can you do something by creating some kind of buy-sell agreement so that over time, maybe on installments, the other 2 kids can buy out the third child before the third child's death, for example. And these are just things you need to talk with the parents about. Also, you need to talk with the parents about, how are they going to live after, when they retire? I mean, a lot of times they've been living off of the profits from the business. When they retire, they won't be working, so the salaries won't be there, or are they going to be getting paid, kind of emeritus salaries for quote-unquote consulting work done on behalf of the business? You're bringing your children on, so that's more people that you would like to compensate and basically pay for their standard of living on the business profits, and there might not be enough profits in order to do that. So these are all things that you need to work out with the parents sooner rather than later. And some of these issues are things that they won't or might feel uncomfortable to discuss. And, that's happened to me in the past, but you really got to be persistent and let them know, especially what kinds of problems can arise if they don't listen to your advice.
So, how about money as a symbol of love?
Money is a symbol of love, or at least some families feel that it is that way. That if you just try to, because we mentioned the capitalist system earlier. Let's be honest, some family businesses want to run with a capitalist system. It's very important. My children aren't going to get anything from me that they haven't earned. That's how I'm going to give it. I don't need to treat everyone fairly if a couple of my kids contribute more towards the business and a couple don't. Well, clearly the kids that are going to get less, from the parents, or less attention, less money. I mean, they're going to feel like they're, more unwanted, and especially in the case where the family businesses are very well known. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are a lot of businesses out there that people associate with these families, and that's kind of really the family's whole identity for the most part is being associated with this business, whether it's a huge business or a smaller business. And to the extent that the family member the child who's not involved with the business is going to feel, even more like an outcast, because, there's fame and, adulation from the general public based on, people's involvement with the business. And how are you doing in the business? Well, I'm actually not working at it. I'm actually, working construction over here. And people could be upset about that. And that's not necessarily fair, but, they could feel unwanted, unloved. And, again, perhaps an outsider needs to be brought in to take care of that.
Okay. How about favoritism?
In what context, Michael?
Well, you're the insider, and quite often, traditionally, was it primogenitor or whatever, the oldest son, so he's going to be the successor, or what have you. So, what about those types of issues?
Well, I have a family situation right now that I'm exactly that I'm dealing with, and it's very hard. I mean, it's just the role of the advisor again is to not make the decisions for the parents. If there's one thing I believe in, it's you've worked hard for your assets, and you have the absolute right to give them either during life or upon death to whoever you want and whatever proportions you want. So if you want to give it all to your oldest son, for example, or most to your oldest son, or set your oldest son up in the business so that your oldest son is CEO and chairperson of the board, that's your right. But it's my duty as an advisor to advise you of the potential future conflicts and problems that could arise because of that, in not treating the family equally or the children equally. Because there could be people ganging up on them if you're on the older child, or there could be just some estrangement and really bad blood within the family, and that's just not something that's good.
Okay. So let's say you decide that you need to get one of these coaches involved. Maybe you should talk about some of the situations where you made really. We sort of talked around this issue. When do you need somebody, and then what do you look for when you're looking for somebody to help these families?
Well, I don't have a huge amount of expertise, in this area. So I know there are, I think it's the Family Firm Institute, where is a website that's very good as far as having a lot of resources there for people that want to learn how to, become a coach or become a better coach. I think that's good for advisors to look into. They also have a list of people who are experts in this business in your state that you actually can call on. A lot of organizations are out there. I mean, this is a thriving business, and you could get referrals from people, and you actually can just ask around and try to find people who are experts. But the key for the advisor is not necessarily in finding the right person, because there's a lot of people out there that you actually can go to and get recommendations on, and even go to websites where they have reviews of these types of people, and you know, you can do investigation. To me, the more important is really just knowing when it's time to call this person, and time when your advice, you know, it just isn't enough, where you're not getting through, or there are actual conflicts. And speaking of conflicts, that's something I know that we wanted to touch on briefly. And basically, I just want to make sure that advisors know that, you know, especially if you're an attorney, that you really need to make sure you get all the requisite waivers when you're actually representing multiple generations of the family. At the beginning, you're probably going to be representing only the mother and father, and that's fine, so you wouldn't need to get waivers there. I mean, you would from the two of them, but not from the other people in the family. But you might be doing estate plans from the children, in which case they will be your clients as well. And so in any interaction that you're going to be doing, for example, the buy-sell agreement that I mentioned earlier, if everyone's going to execute it, you actually need to either have all of them be represented by separate counsel. Maybe you can prepare the agreement, but have all of them, you know, represented by separate counsel, which, you know, kind of destroys the kind of family good feeling dynamic that you're hoping to have. Or you can actually write and get, you know, informed waivers of the potential conflict from each member of the family. That means writing a letter to each member of the family detailing possible, you know, conflicts that could arise. And then after that, they can, you know, properly give informed consent to your representation.
Yeah. I think we need to be careful of our own myopia sometimes, if you will. So we think that we can do everything, and you know, as professionals and as, you know, educated people and so forth. But sometimes we can be too close to an issue, and sometimes those family members really do need their own separate counsel.
Yes.
And so we need to, I think, be aware of these things. I'm dealing with a situation right now, you know, with a family where Dad is actually, he's given his interests some time ago in a family corporation to his sons.
Yes.
And then he's also got daughters, and then he's got the whole family involved in a family partnership. And so now we've got, you know, a matter that we're trying to resolve between the two. So I'm saying, okay, right, I need to have, you know, consent from everybody even to talk about this issue.
Sure.
So be aware of that.
Let me be very clear that my absolute preferred way of operating with the scenario that I just mentioned is to have at least the children have their own independent counsel.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about the process for family business succession planning. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works.
Well, I think, again, the process would start with the meeting with the parents, but I think it has to, if you can be persuasive enough with the parents, it has to evolve into a meeting with all of the family members. Because you have to bring all these issues on the table, Michael. I mean, these are things, and it could be hard because these are things that in this family meeting or meetings, you know, the kids may be have been holding things in all their lives, especially if they're more domineering parents, and parents who actually haven't really spoken about this to the children. You know, the parents may just be reluctant, and even when they have the meeting, sometimes reluctance can come across as, you know, in smaller form of hostility because they don't, you know, they just don't want to talk about it. They just haven't thought about it.
Right.
And children can actually, you know, let the parents know exactly, honestly, how they feel about being involved in the business. And then things, you know, ideally, what this family meeting can actually do is just get all the cards on the table, and then the advisor, you know, the attorney and the accountant can prepare a plan that really tries to maximize, you know, at what everyone's feelings are in a, not only in a cohesive family way, but also in a corporate and tax efficient way as well.
Right. I think related to this, I think looking at a point from a discussion on this, that basically, well, first you already mentioned bringing reality to the table, but I think clarifying whether the expectations are realistic or unrealistic. So, and really we're talking about, in a sense, for each family member, you know, what are they looking for?
Correct.
Out of this, and is this something that that can actually be accomplished.
Right. It can be irreconcilable,
Yeah.
especially, as we mentioned earlier, if you take what the family wants and then you bring into the fact what do these other non-family key employees want. Because what the family might finally decide on might be something that could potentially drive the other key employees away. So that also has to be taken into account. It'd be nice, frankly, to have, after the family meetings, to have meetings with key employees, especially if they have a long relationship, you know, with the parents prior to the meeting.
Okay. So we only have a minute or two left. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
But how do you get started?
I mean, it's really just, it's really kind of belong to I mean, really it's the advisor's responsibility to bring something like this up. I mean, if the you know, husband and wife don't have an advisor and they may just start thinking about this, but a lot of times when husband and wife have the family business, they come to see an estate planning attorney. You know, I think it's my duty, at least if they're, you know, middle-aged, in order to bring up, you know, if you thought about, you know, bringing your kids into the business, what are you planning to do? Because that type of planning starts immediately. I mean, you're going to have to dispose of the assets somehow. So it might be initially you're going to, when the kids are young, you're going to give it equally to the kids. And then as they grow older, you need to tell them, you need to really come back to me if you think there's a child that doesn't want to inherit this part of the business, and other childs do, because we're going to need to, you know, take advantage of that and take account of that, hopefully with other assets that you can give, again, to the child who doesn't want to be involved in the business.
Right. So again, I think we're talking, there are events that happen that seem to spur action on these things, and part of it is maybe thinking of the estate plan, maybe it's retirement coming up, or whatever.
You hope so,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Richard, I think we're really about out of time.
Okay.
So mostly I want to thank you for joining me
Thank you,
today as
Michael.
my guest.
It's
It's
a
a pleasure
pleasure.
having you. And folks, I think you can see it's really a difficult area. We haven't talked about a word about taxes here. And there are a lot of special tax considerations, but you know, frankly, these emotional things that we're talking about are really more important. They're the key issues. And with that, go and see your advisors about this. I'm hoping that this will initiate a conversation for you. We'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.